Welcome to the coaching life. 2 weeks in a row, Coach. How you doing today?
I'm doing well now that we're finally getting started.
Yeah, we've had a little bit of delay here.
Yeah, we did.
Things go off the rails
happens.
sometimes. They don't go as planned, you know? Anyways.
Sure. I really think we're going to have a good show today.
You think so?
I do. We've got some good things to talk about today.
I've got a prelude
Let's hear it.
to the show. I learned something, or I was reminded of something last night. It was a very good reminder, and I feel blessed for it. God gives us so many things. The greatest thing that he gives us, I think, is our relationships. And,
Yes.
you know, at the forefront of that is our relationship with Jesus. And that's the most important possession we have on this earth. It's one of the, I would say maybe, you know, relationships in general is the only thing that you can take with you when you go, when you leave, right? And
That is absolutely correct. I agree with that 100%.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, the secondary to that is your family and friends. And we had an unfortunate occurrence last night. My son Jake, in his first JV football game, his third snap of the game, took off running around the edge and was tackled. It was a good run, not a huge hit, but he landed odd. And long story short, he ended up breaking his collarbone. But so he's probably out for the season. He might be able to come back at the end, but I know in the past they've taken care of the it's his throwing arm, so you know it's double whammy. But you know, in as bad as of a feeling that was, and I was just reminded, you know, because you reach out to people that you care about and you love, and you say, hey, this just happened. You know, not really that they can do anything, just to kind of share your
Sure.
your sorrow with, and you know, disappointment, and that's uplifting. But then you have two people that reach out to you and ask, you know, how's Jake? How's he doing? How are you guys? You know, let us know if you need anything. And you know, people do that, friends do that, and coaches have done that. And you know, it just made me think of, you know, all the conversations that I've had in the last few years about all the things that coaches do wrong.
Sure.
And you know, times that I've maybe had to speak up for myself and defend myself, or defend the people that I coach with, or you know, so on and so forth. And you know, when we were sitting in the waiting room last night, I wasn't thinking about any of those things. Not thinking about wins, not thinking about batting averages, not thinking about good plays, bad plays. I was just very fortunate and felt very blessed that God had put the people in my life that he had. And I think it's a lesson for, you know, it was a reminder for me. I knew that, right? I knew that. I put value on that, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit today. But it was a good reminder for me of what really matters.
Right. We talk a lot about what really matters. In fact, that's a major theme in, I don't even remember if I titled one of the chapters, and did I title it?
You did, and we
What
actually
Really
have
Matters?
a podcast. We have an
Yeah, I
episode
thought,
to
yeah, we
talk
did
about
one.
what really
Yeah. And that's really what it's all about. And if you're brand new to this podcast and you're starting today to listen, then hopefully that's what you'll get out of today's episode, as we take a look at some things that are pretty powerful in all of our programs. We all have an opportunity to be very intentional in developing all three of these things. And we're going to talk about three things today: the power of roles, expertise, and relationships. Thank you for introducing the power of relationships in your most recent experience. But Let me go back to that. That just really sucks, man. I hate hearing that. You sent me a video from Friday night. You were at one football game watching your son. I was watching my nephew up in Lancaster, and you said Jake's in the game. Because I think Megs had scored like 120 points by this point, right?
Yeah,
and
they set a school record.
They did, yeah, scored
points.
ended up with 80 points. And the 80th point was scored by none other than Jake Martin.
Yeah.
On was that a 60-yard run?
54.
54-yard bootleg, didn't get touched.
No,
Yeah,
he didn't.
Nobody touched him.
Yep.
So got a stud freshman quarterback out there in the varsity game, and doesn't get hit in a JV game and get knocked out for the season. That really stinks.
Yep. But it's part of the game. I think we've always talked about it. It was tough because I saw, if you watch a lot of football, you've seen these injuries happen before, and you kind of recognize the hit and how they land, and it's like, ooh.
Oh yeah.
And I saw it. And another thing, he actually had a concussion too. A kid came down on top of him afterwards and banged his head a little bit. And but I just thought, boy, my parents are going to be so mad. They're not exactly 100% behind him playing football. I know my mom especially isn't a big football fan, so I was just thinking, this isn't going to go over well, but everyone's okay. Everyone's
I mean, it happens. It's part of the sport. And in fact, when I told April, she said, "Man, it seems like there have been a lot of collarbone-ish, injuries." This year and just in the first couple of weeks, he's got a teammate that he played with this summer. He went down the very first week with a collarbone break as well. I know that there was a kid that went and got X-rayed after Eastern's first game to see. Thank goodness it was negative, but that was what the question was there. And she said, "You'd think they would design shoulder pads in such a way that it can't that it would like protect it." And I said, well, it's not necessarily the impact. It's not an impact injury. It's an injury where your body goes one way. I mean, it is an impact injury, but it's because of your shoulder typically going back and the rest of your body going this direction, and it snaps that collarbone. And there is no pad that can stop that.
Yeah.
The only thing that you could design to stop it would be a brace that would go all the way across your shoulders and back, I would think, and then you would never be able to throw the football.
That's a good point.
You have to have some mobility in there, and so it's just it's a violent sport. It is what it is. You're getting tackled. You're going to break stuff.
Yep, and it wasn't a huge tackle, but the collision with the ground was pretty violent.
And right, yeah. I mean, he could just literally get tripped up. It could have not involved a hit whatsoever. Yep. He could have gotten tripped up, and the way he landed could have actually caused that happen. I saw Wes Riffle. I actually think listens to our podcast. When he played for the post 128 American Legion baseball team with me, he was pitching and threw I won't call it a wild pitch for Wes's sake. I'll call it a pass ball. It's a pass ball in the catcher, and runner was at third base, and so it was one of those bang bang plays at the plate. And Wes comes in. He's a left-handed pitcher, and so he kind of goes across home plate, catches the ball, and goes back to tag like this. And literally the kid slid. I can remember this. This was several years ago. Slid into his arm and pulled his arm back like that. So the tag got pulled back. So his body stayed put, and his arm got pulled back. And the impact was like in the shoulder area, right?
Pulled it apart.
And it just when he came over, he started holding his shoulder, and he came over, and you could see it was a triangle shape pointing straight out, and we could see right away. Oh yeah, he broke that collarbone, and
I'll be darned.
Yeah, it was a that's baseball. It's football, baseball. I mean, it's you play in sports. It's stuff like that's going to happen. Unfortunately, it did. And what's the recovery time?
We haven't really heard yet. We've heard different things. I think best case scenario is 4 weeks. Worst case is 12 weeks. And surgery is a possibility. How bad? But I don't think his was that bad. The doctor last night at the ER told us it was a clean break. So typically, I've talking to some other people that's been through it that's a good sign. But I know I would say his season's over. His football season's over just because I think talking a little bit with the head coach last night, they wants to be very, it's his throwing arm, so he wants to be very cautious about how they bring him back. And,
sure.
It's unfortunate, but it could be worse.
Has Has the baseball staff heard about it yet, or
I don't know. I haven't heard
or
anything.
basketball coach? Yeah.
A few coaches have reached out and asked how he's doing. So I definitely appreciate
I figured.
that. And,
yeah.
it's like that. I think that's what kind of just motivated me to even open that way, because we're so hard on our coaches sometimes, and that I don't even know if I should say it, but I'm going to. When the trainer, Jake told me last night, when the trainer put him up on because they took him by squad because of his concussion.
Yeah.
They were worried about him, and when the trainer helped him put him up on the stretcher bed there, he told him he loved him. And those are the types of interactions.
The athletic trainer?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, those are the types of interactions that nobody sees.
That's fantastic.
When the coach is on the field making the dumb call, or when the team loses or something like that. That's the core of the relationship right there. And I don't know. I just caution people to dig as deep as they can into who a coach is and what that relationship is between them and their player before there's any type of animosity in there.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to hate a person when they love your son or your daughter. And
right.
And what happens a lot of times is coaches love their players, and people don't understand that.
Yeah, that's a fact.
So,
well, for what it's worth, the few people that I've known who have suffered that injury have told me that they felt like it healed back even stronger than what I don't know if that's medical fact.
Does that mean the next time they got tackled, the other side?
It'll be the other side. Yeah. So go ahead and get that one out of the way right now and
go ahead and break it, do it up. Nah.
Shoot. Part of the motivation for today's podcast topic came from an opportunity that I actually had this past weekend to go and speak in front of my coaching peers, the great fraternity of high school baseball coaches. The Ohio High School Baseball Coaches Association, the OHSBCA, is hosting a series of roadshow clinics. And so they're calling it the OHSBCA Roadshow. And what they are, they're just kind of regional clinics. I think there's 4 or 5 of them where different districts are offering to host and just open it up to any coaches who want to come. And if you're a member of if you're a member of the Southeast District, you could go for free, but it was open to anyone. So youth coaches could come. There were a couple guys who coach youth ball in the Chillicothe area who came, just paid $25, and it was a sort of an all-day event, 10 a.m. until I was the last presenter, and I was at 2 o'clock. And they're doing, next one's in Grove City here next month, and then there'll be another one in October, and then another one in November, and then hopefully we'll get to have our statewide clinic in January, which is sort of the reason why we're doing these road shows, because for the last 2 years, the statewide clinic, which is really a highlight, it's a highlight of my January. I mean, as soon as New Year's is over, the next thing I look forward to is I start packing to that for that clinic, and I've actually never been to the American Baseball Coaches Association conference, and that's something that I have. That's sort of a dream of mine to begin making that part of my yearly experience, and that one is a little bit more difficult to get to. One, it's obviously more expensive, but it's also it could be further away as well. It could be in California. But whenever it's close by, Nashville or Louisville or something like that, it would be really great. Indianapolis, I think it was just there recently.
Is that
It'd be great to go.
Twitter hashtag? Is that do they have that?
Oh yeah, they do. They do a lot of online. Yeah, they do a lot of.
It's like trending questions.
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
and especially they do that. That's where Jeremy Sheetinger actually ran a podcast. Coach Sheetinger, he's a college coach now, but he's actually still doing a podcast on behalf of, or I think hosted by the ABCA called. The coach's dugout chatter. I think I'm botching it all up. I'm looking for it. I've got it. Yeah, Dugout Chatter podcast by Stick and Ball TV. So I think it's still connected to ABCA, but I'm not positive. It might just be his own thing, and it's sponsored. But he's really the one that is responsible for getting the ABCA in the podcasting world, and it's been really really helpful. But they haven't been able to have that one in person for the past couple of years either. Right. So it's been an online clinic. The state of Ohio one hasn't happened in person. So we're really hoping that this is the year.
Which, by the way, definitely not the same thing.
What's that? The
online clinic.
Oh, no, it really isn't. I mean, it's granted, I mean, it's the same people and they're presenting and you get a chance, but that in-person interaction where you're sitting up with guys in a hotel, out in the hotel lobby, sitting across from each other and just listening to their stories, you don't get that in a Zoom call. In a Zoom meeting,
right? Yes,
you don't get. That's the in between stuff that you just don't get, and that's why we really prefer the stuff. So anyway, kind of going off on a tangent there, but it was a real blessing. I tell you, when I first got asked to do this, I was actually on vacation when Coach Noble texted me, and my first reaction was, "Ooh, I don't know." But then I obviously decided to do it. Well, you just get
Why didn't he call your agent?
You get this because you think to yourself, well, who have I seen speak at these kinds of things? Uh-huh. It's Hall of Fame coaches, right? Coaches that have been in the game, they've been coaching high school baseball as a head coach for many years. They got 300, 400, 500 wins. They're in the Hall of Fame. They've been inducted to the High School Baseball Coaches Hall of Fame.
They have a lot of expertise.
Yeah, a lot of expertise. Yeah, and or it's college coaches or professional coaches. So if you're one of those three, then you typically get asked to speak. So my first thought was, oh, why is Coach Noble asking me to speak? Well, I mean, they booked it as a so I was someone who was an author, who I have a book, and so I kind of went off of that. I developed around that then, and I said, okay, let me tell you why I wrote the book. I couldn't turn coaching off when I resigned, and so this is what was happening to me in my mind and in my heart, and so I just wrote some things down, and really what it sort of ended up being was a book about a lot of the mistakes I had made as a father coach, a dad coach, a father who was raising a kid in youth baseball who I thought really wanted to play at the next level. When I was right, he did, but I know I really wanted him to play at the next level. And so the sort of the what happens in that relationship when sometimes dad wants it. There are days when dad wants it more than son wants it, right?
That doesn't happen.
And then there are days when dad hopes that son wants it, and then but you make a lot of mistakes in that realm.
Absolutely.
And then so I told him it was just a really honest look at some of those things, and then there's some things in there that I learned through coaching as well. But I said I certainly do not have the same kind of experience that many of you have had. I mean, I looked at them. I said any of you guys could write a book. And I think one of the things that was really encouraging to me was I was the last speaker of the day, and so we kind of were chatting around. A handful of us were chatting around the guys that were in leadership of it, and Coach Noble said something to me that really was meaningful to me. He said, "Hey, I'm really glad that we had you as our last speaker of the day, because you're a Southeast District guy, and you get it. You understand what we have down here and what we don't have down here." And what he meant by that was I actually opened up by talking a little bit about what you and I talked about. We mentioned it briefly in last week's podcast, where we said we feel like we're the podcast, like we were calling for our listeners to give us some ideas. And we were saying, hey, we want guests as well, and any of you could be a guest. And one of the points that we made was, you don't have to be a famous person. You don't have to be a big, someone has had a ton of experience. You don't have to have a really great, successful program with a lot of resources, because we kind of feel like we're the podcast for the little guy, right. The common person, the common coach, the common program. And I said, I'll be honest with you guys. I mean, the guys that spoke before me, they're from a suburb somewhere in Cincinnati. And they were talking about how they got 4 gyms and all these cage tunnels inside their gyms. And they got 55 kids come out and they cut every year. And they buy every single kid a J band every year and all this. And I kind of opened up and said, we don't even have an indoor cage, guys. And I said, how many of you even have that?
Everyone gasped. Right. The audience was like,
right, exactly. I said, If I were to buy, I said, I'll tell you the honest truth. If I were to buy all of my players, which is a total of 24 or so, right? 24, 25 in a school district our size. If I were to buy all of them a J band, that would be our budget. That would be everything we've got right now, right before we do any fundraising. I said, I said sometimes when I go to these clinics and when I listen to these podcasts and I hear these guys talk, I think, wow, that's great. I would love to do that at my school. I'd love to do that with my program, but I can't. And I said, so I'm going to talk to you today about some things that I know all of you can do because I know where you're at and I know your program because I am that program. I'm in that program as well, and I know what kinds of resources you have and don't have.
Yes.
And so let's just talk about that.
Good stuff.
So yeah, we're going to talk about power today, and you're the one that gave me the idea, and I sort of I took the idea, so I appreciate that. I asked you because I texted you. I said, what am I going to talk about with these guys? Right? I mean, what. I really did have sort of a blank. Like, I don't think I have anything to say to them. And in the back of my mind, I know that I do, but I felt, I guess it was that imposter syndrome. Yeah. That imposter syndrome was rearing its ugly head again. But you shot right back. And what you shot back with was a podcast that you had just listened to recently about management and leadership. And I actually ended up listening to it as well. After you sent it, you basically just put 3 lines. You put role power, expertise power, and relationship power.
Yep.
And then I asked you, oh, that's really good. And so I kind of jotted it down, but then I said, did that just come off the top of your head? And you told me about this podcast, and you sent me the link. And it is. There is an entire group that you know more about it than I do. Why don't you take it from here?
It's called Manager Tools, and it's just a series of podcasts. It's a company.
Sure.
I think the owner of the company is Mark Hortzman, and that it's basically a series of podcasts and books. They have a book called The Effective Manager, and it's just a series of discussions with him, and it's kind of like what we do. Really, it's not all that sophisticated.
Yeah.
But they just talk about things that managers do, that employees do, and they can do better. And it's based off of years and years of their study and their experience and things like that. So it's something I've actually been listening to them. It's something that my team here at Ohio University, my IT team has implemented. We listen to these and we talk about them on a weekly basis. But also, I'm in a leadership management development program that information technology has started, and it's kind of helping me grow as a manager type individual. And I thought, it's a good opportunity to become a better coach, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually do talk a lot about coaching in our cohort discussions and stuff like that. But by and large, over the last since January, we've been reading and listening to these podcasts. And it was just it was a podcast that I particularly liked, mainly because I haven't heard your speech, so I don't really know what angle you came. But in this podcast, they emphasize the importance of relationship power, and I kind of lean that way too. But it's not that they diminished role power, expertise power. They just wanted to emphasize how important it was for that person to person interaction.
Right.
And, what it means. And one thing that they emphasized was that power, we're sitting here saying role power, expertise power, relationship power. And when I just say power, it comes off of kind of a negative tone, power. What do you...
Yeah, I'd say to some people probably what...
Yeah,
we're used to hearing power. I mean,
sure.
That's kind of the way I opened it up with the baseball coaches. I said, we talk a lot about power, and we want power. I mean, when I say, you want kids with power.
Yes.
If your team has power,
you want power.
You're going to win.
Want kids with power. You want to empower kids, right? So there's a bunch of power transfer going on in coaching, but I think a good definition of it is power is the ability to get things done.
Yeah.
And everybody has a certain degree of power, and you have it in different ways, different forms, and
right.
That's kind of where the podcast takes us.
And I sort of use both of those. I really, because there are actually like 4 or 5 different podcast episodes that they use to cover these topics.
And
I listen to all those
4-part.
Yes, right.
I forgot about that.
And you know, you could tell obviously because it's meant for business and leadership and management, and so that they were really emphasizing power in all of them, right? They were emphasizing that there is power in you understanding what your role is and utilizing that role. Mm-hmm. There is power in you being an expert in, and there is power in relationships, and it's almost like how can you use these things for power? And I kind of turned it the other direction, and I talked about the power of these things. So it's like in those podcasts, role, expertise, and relationships were adjectives, and power was the noun. But in my talk, roles, expertise, and relationships were nouns. I wanted to emphasize, look, we have to understand the power of everybody having a role, a well-defined, specifically defined role, and helping them to embrace that role and how powerful that can be for our teams. We have to understand that there is power in actually encouraging people, particularly on our staffs. This is the angle that I went, our coaching staffs, to be an expert in something, right? And I talked about how I developed job descriptions for all of my assistant coaches, job description for myself, for a head coach as well. And then our playbook in our team manual, we have those, every coach has a page. Head coach, this is what you can expect from the head coach. This is the job description. And then assistant coach isn't just assistant coach. Assistant coach, I think if you just say, hey, you're my assistant coach, I think assistant coaches want to know what do I do, right? So when Gibby hired me as an assistant coach back years ago when I first started as an assistant at Athens, he didn't even call me an assistant coach. He said, you're my pitching coach. And he said, he said, not only are you my pitching coach, you're going to handle the pitchers and catchers. And he said, you got them. And I knew, I better become an expert in this. Yeah. I knew what to focus on, right? And it wasn't that I didn't do other things. I hit fungos, I threw BP, I worked with infielders and outfielders, but I knew I was the pitching guy. And I think there's a lot of power that our programs can have in understanding that and developing specificity among our assistant coaches and even among the players.
Absolutely right. Within a role.
Right.
Just like you said, everyone's going to play a role, and those roles are important.
Oh, they're tremendously important. And on your teams, we like to talk, and I think Steve Miller mentioned this when we had him on the podcast a while back. He talked about how this is the mindset at Trimble, and I share this mindset. We don't have bench players. We have roles. We have on-field roles and off-field roles. We have playing roles and non-playing roles, right? And we even have a quote inside our dugout that says, we are not all on the field, but we are all in the game. And that mindset needs to be, you are always involved in this game in some way.
Yes.
And there are going to be years, there are going to be days, there might be weeks, and there might be entire years where your role isn't on the field.
Man, I've got a great example of that.
Let's hear it.
I'm coaching my son's 12U baseball team this fall, and I've got an older kid that pitches well, really good pitcher. And we played this past weekend. I threw him. He threw around 90 pitches, which is a lot for a 12-year-old. But we play a week at a time.
It's August,
and he's
been playing all summer.
Year, but right around 90, he kind of winced with his arm, and I said, "Your arm bothering?" He's like, kind of. He didn't want to admit it.
Yeah.
It's like, these
that means it had been for a while.
So then it's like time.
Yeah.
And you pull him out. And that was the first he pitched a great game. He only gave up 3 runs through, I think, five innings. He didn't play the second game. I just kept him on the bench. I didn't want to.
That's smart.
Yeah, right, sure. And absolutely amazing attitude. He didn't second guess at one time. He didn't, and he brought so much energy to our team in that second game from the bench. He was loud. He was getting on people. You know, he was cheering everybody on, and I saw that, and I'm glad we brought that up. I don't talk to my teams all that much, especially in the fall after games, but it's definitely something that I want to circle back to, because I think he had a huge impact on that game. He still hit. You know, he was still in the lineup, but he wasn't defensively. He wasn't on the field, and I think he had a huge impact on that game just with the energy that he brought. And that's a great example of role power there. So
well, and I think what you just said is it's the way that you develop the culture of understanding and embracing and having energy regardless of what your role is you build it up. You talk about it. You said, I'm going to circle back and talk about it. And that's one of the things that I think, that's one of the things I emphasized in my talk on Sunday. I said, all these kids, every single role that we have, we often try to make sure that we talk about not just how valuable it is in a generic way, but in a specific way, right? I mean, we'll tell the guys who are in charge of charting our opponents as they, as they're hitting, and when we chart our opponents pitching, we tell them, look, we're going to use that stuff not just in this game. We're going to use it in the future when we play that team again.
In the sectionals, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what they come in. That's what it comes really.
Without a doubt. And and I said, I'll just give you one example. One of the charts that we do is we use a radar gun to chart our own pitchers so that we can see, where they're at, where their fastball is, and then where their off-speed stuff is. And we had noticed one of our best pitcher this past year, Matty Blanchard. He had really phenomenal fastball, and he has a really great curveball as well. And I noticed that his curveball seemed like he was trying to throw it too slow, trying to slow it down too much. And when you do that, it creates this loopy curveball. It looks like it's breaking more, and it may in fact break more in terms of distance, from right to left, or up
just
top.
Drop.
But it's too easy to pick up. It's too easy to track as a hitter. You see that thing, if you see a big loopy break, you can time that thing up and drive it. Yeah. What you want is a late breaking sharp curveball that may not break as far. Now, if you can get one to break, that'll snap off really far, you're in good shape. And so I looked at the chart. I said, hey, let me see his pitch chart for a second. From the kid that had been behind the fence. Now, in high school baseball, you could only send your own guys out there in scrimmages. When in real games, we had to use like JV guys that just attended the game. We weren't allowed to use uniform guys to go outside the dugout.
Secretive.
Yeah, they have a rule. Well, it was a fan. It was one of our fans that was doing it, right? And so anyway, I wanted to see the chart, and I noticed that his fastball was 85 and his curveball was 68. I said, Matty, you need to get this curveball up to 75. I said, you got to throw that thing, right? I mean, it's too slow. Your changeup is right around 72. I said, your curveball shouldn't be that slow.
Right.
And so he started throwing it. He started really letting it loose, and it did. It came in, and Jace was like, man, that looks like a fastball, and it just drops like crazy. And I said, that's what you want. But see, I went back and I told the guys that were charting, I said, we would have not. I mean, you could see it with the naked eye, but we had the data because the kid was charting.
Right.
We had the data to say, okay, we need to make a change here.
Right.
And
it confirms.
That was and that was thanks to you taking on that role and being happy with it.
Not only did that help the team, but that helped Matty Blanchard.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
That's impact.
That's just a small one, but every kid that embraces a role like that, I think it's really important to have like a dugout organizer. So we'll put up a chart in our dugout and just say, here's what everybody's role is for the day. And usually it ends up becoming the same person. You see somebody who really embraces it, but it's not always the same person because you don't always have the same guys playing.
Right.
Some guys earn a chance to play today. And so they're in the field, and now it becomes somebody else's job. And so we go ahead and put that chart up there and write the name in. Here's who that is. And what the dugout organizer does is that guy makes sure, like, look, we don't have these big fancy dugouts with the cubbies and everybody's names and numbers. And so our hats and helmets, they're on the bench somewhere. And usually the guys put them in the same place. We did install a shelf where we said, hey, anyone that's on base, your stuff's up here. If you're up to bat, you put your stuff up here. That way we know where they're at. But that dugout organizer says, hey, we got 2 outs. And we've got so-and-so on second, so-and-so on third, and so-and-so up to bat. So here, you're taking his stuff. And so we know who's picking up who. And when there's 3 outs, you go. You're on and off. And that dugout organizer makes sure that we always got somebody chasing the foul balls when it gets hit to the fence. Like foul ball. Behind the catcher, right? If it's not him, it's somebody. Hey, you got it this inning, and make it fun, right? You make it fun, like hey,
Yeah.
you're going to chase every foul ball, and don't let that guy on deck over there beat you, right?
We saw that a couple times.
Just have fun with it. And I think when kids do that, now you don't just have 9 kids playing in the game. You got 13, 14, 15, 16 kids who are actively involved in parts of the game. I had a kid at Athens who took the issue of playing a role so seriously that not only did he do a chart, but as soon as he got to the game, he knew he was behind a big senior class with a lot of talent, and he knew that his playing time was going to be limited. So you got a couple choices there. You could sulk about it and show up every day and feel sorry for yourself, or you can say, okay, I'm going to have a different role this year, but next year I'll probably get my shot, right? And so he showed up with with a smile on his face, a lot of energy. He grabbed his chart. If I hadn't gotten the charts out yet, he'd be like, "Hey, coach, you care if I get the charts out of your bag?" Oh, not at all. He got the chart out, put the initial things on it that he needed to do to indicate what it was, and then as he was charting, he also took on an extra role of reading pitchers and reading coaches. He would actually watch. He would just watch the pitchers and see if he can pick up on something. And it's no wonder this kid now is about to graduate. He's a senior this year in college, and he's an engineer.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Details were important to him.
But I was going to ask if the parents were upset, if you had any conversations.
They were. Yeah, the parents weren't up. They were not happy that he wasn't playing.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
But see, here's the thing. To their credit, they're raising a pretty good kid there.
Oh, they are. And you know what? And it, to come around to the ending, we're all, they're great with me now. He asked me to write letters of reference for him for scholarships and things like that. And every time I've seen them, they've been really, really grateful.
So those are the types of people you want on your team.
Yes. Oh, right? Without a doubt. And he just, he would read the pictures. He would help our players out. And there was a time when he picked up, was one of those coaches that had a number system for his signs. And he was sitting over there, and I looked on the back of his chart, and he's got all these 3-digit numbers all over his charts, and I'm like, what is that? And he goes, I'm listening to every single number he writes, and I'm trying to find a pattern. And he figured out their verbal bunt signs. It was funny. So that's off the field. On the field, even like in practice, he would also, and I remember going around, I remember asking him this question, and I remember the answer he gave, which was just absolutely phenomenal. In practice, he would lay out in the outfield for balls, right? If he was on that defensive group in BP, he would do what you want kids to do, practice like you play. And even if he didn't think he was ever going to get to play, he practiced like he was going to be ready to play, and sprinted everywhere. He would make a contest with the other guys out there, saying, "Hey, if you catch it in the air, it's worth 25 points. If you catch it on one hop, it's worth 15 points." And they would just have a point system, and they'd be out there. And I walked over there, so I like to make a habit of developing relationship during that time.
Right.
And so as a head coach, it's a nice luxury to have somebody else that could throw BP. And I just walk around and talk to guys. And whenever he was in the Shagger group, where I could actually bother him, where I could talk, go and chat with him, I said, hey, I just want to tell you that I really appreciate how hard you go in practice. And I said, especially, with you knowing that there's little chance that you're going to get in the game tomorrow, right? And he said, well, coach, I figured that some of these guys need to be pushed to practice hard every day. And so if they see me practicing hard, they should too. And he wasn't wrong, because there were guys that were more talented. There were guys that were bigger, stronger, faster, more talented. They were going to play. They needed to be in the lineup, and they knew it. And they would slack off unless they saw somebody like that. And it did. He was right. He pushed our starters to be their best.
No, there's I don't know what you'd call it. Is it a cliche, maybe? That, hitting is contagious. Defense is contagious.
Yeah.
What really is contagious is energy.
Oh, without any doubt.
And if you have negative energy as a player, that spreads.
That's contagious.
But if you have positive energy, it also spreads.
Yes.
And that's a great way to. It's an easy way to
Sure.
because you control it. You don't have to be great. Nothing in what you just said referred to how many balls he actually caught, or how many times he actually made good plays on a ball or anything like that. It was just the effort that he took going in, and other players see that, and it's a good thing for the team.
It is, and I think we as coaches have a responsibility to point out how valuable that is to your team when your team has success, because that team that he was on, that was 2017, and that team that particular year went to the regional final, and it was the second year in a row they had done that. And so in our banquet that year, we always picked out like a dirty baseball out of the bucket, and we would write with a Sharpie "dirt bag" on it, and we gave the dirt bag of the year award to him. And when I called him up there, I explained the reason why. And here's the thing. I think it was the first time his mom and dad heard some of those stories, because
absolutely
all they see is that he's not playing. They don't see practices. They don't see how he's practicing, and he's not going home and telling them, "Boy, you should see how well I practiced today." Right. Those conversations probably aren't happening, and so all they're seeing is that he's on the bench, but they don't see what he's doing while he's on the bench. And so they heard those stories, and I saw an instant change in the way their attitude was toward the season.
Yeah.
And
to that wasn't their fault.
Right.
That they didn't know. And but that, I think that's kind of what we're talking about today. And you mentioned it. We have to point these things out. We have to talk about them. We have to let people know that there's value in these different roles.
Yeah. Yeah. And the value there was, and we just came right out and said it, you helped our team win a district championship.
And he did. He did.
Yeah. You helped our team be the best they could be. And if they don't play, if they don't every single day come out and want to be the best they can be, they're probably not going to win championships. And so this championship is as much a result of your effort as it is the people who got the stats, who were on the stat lines.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. They just had different roles.
Right. So there's power in that, right? I mean, that's incredible power. You got people checking in on you during our podcast? I do too. My phone has rang 3 times in the last 10 minutes.
Really?
Yeah. My calendar's blocked. That doesn't matter, though, does it?
Is that the negative reality of expertise power?
Or it might just be the power of knowing a little bit about everything, and so you're the guy that everybody goes to when they have an emergency, because their emergencies, or their lack of planning seems to constitute an emergency on my end.
Right.
And I have told people that before, actually, that look, I'm sorry it was urgent that you got a hold of me and I wasn't available, but I don't know what to tell you, right? So, oh well. Where are we going next?
Expertise power. It's a good segue.
Yeah.
I think this is I'm interested to see what direction you took on this, because I think this is what a young I know for me, it was what I thought coaching was all about, and is how much and the X's and O's and the strategies and the mechanics and things like that, and that's what made you, or makes a person, a good coach. That's what I originally thought. But from my perspective now, expertise power is more about your desire to gain it more than it is your ability to
attain
wield it, to use it, because you're never going to know enough, right? And you always want to know more, but you do have to. There's a certain power in being able to, like you said, you were the pitching coach, but you still did other things, and that's there's value in that for a team. There's value in that for directs, whether it be people that are reporting to you in business or reporting to you as players, that you kind of are able to display a certain type of knowledge about the game that you're coaching. And the good news about that is you have control over that.
You do.
Maybe not as much as you might with relationship power, but you can increase that expertise power, and you can increase it every day of your life. So you have the opportunity to do that and gain that and use it to make your teams better.
Without a doubt. In the same way that I want players to know what their role is, and so we have to define it specifically so that they, and coaches as well. I also want players to take on the attitude of be an expert in this.
Yes.
If don't just assume like don't just assume what a balk is, right? If you're a pitcher, and you need to understand everything there is about what it means to balk. That way, you don't do it. And I've seen some really good pitchers get in a hurry out there and just balk. I mean, that's just one example. But I think about base running a lot when in particular this year, I actually asked our guys to become expert base runners. And I said, here's how you do it. One, when you get the opportunity, that's an aspect of our game, the game of baseball, that you don't get a chance to practice a lot in practice settings, unless you take advantage of the batting practice time, where you can actually see live balls coming off of live at bats, and then you work on base running at that time. But what'll often happen with any team, whether they're 10 years old or whether they're 18 years old, is they'll get out there on the base. If you do have a station where you have a base runner station and they're supposed to be getting those reads, what do they do? They get into a routine of just trotting from one base to the next, right? Because my goal is to get around all these bases and then come back to first base, and it becomes a conditioning drill, basically. And that's not what it is. We want you to become an expert in knowing exactly how far you can go off of first base when there's a fly ball hit to left field. Instead of getting off, 5 or 6 feet from your leadoff, if that ball's deep in left field, go all the way to the bag. And so how do you become an expert in that? One, that's where I should go. The further the ball away is from me, the further out from the bag I can get. But I also have to make sure that I pay attention to our opponents, what their arms are like out there, right? So I pay attention to that beforehand, and I got a feel for how deep the field is in different parts of the field, and all those things. I said, look, there's so much that we take for granted, that we all just kind of have a general knowledge of baseball. But I said, take every phase of this game and determine, just write it down if you have to, determine what will it take for me to be an expert at this and become that. Pick one part. Pick your favorite part. If it's hitting, start with hitting. But I challenged all of our guys, just because I see base running is it's such an overlooked part of the game. It's not just my teams; it's every team I see. And I don't know if it's not just a Southeast Ohio thing; it's an everywhere thing. Base running is atrocious for the most part, and it's so atrocious that when you finally play against a team that does it really well, you notice it. I'll give you an example. That SLS team that we played, you were thinking the same team, weren't you?
Yep.
Those kids knew how to run the bases, and they put pressure on the defense. They put pressure on the pitcher.
Yes.
They put pressure on your fielders and the catcher. I mean, they put pressure on the coaches.
Yeah.
Because what are we paying attention to, right? We're paying attention to what they're doing. And I think if everyone took it upon themselves to be really good at, to be an expert in that, then it wouldn't be as noticeable. It would just be part of the game. But it's so noticeable when a team is really good at it that I think it's telling for the rest.
I'd say that's
for the rest of us.
Every part,
right? Fielding, boy, this team really fields well. I mean, they get around the ball. They're smooth. Yeah. You're right. I mean, become an expert.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun. I was thinking, from a coaching or a practice planning perspective, you could take that. Well, if you use the word base running, you could practice a season worth of practices just on base running.
You really could.
Details. base running.
Yeah.
Because you just, if you
Shoot, Matt Tallarico used to be an assistant coach at Wright State in Dayton. Has made an entire living on
coaching bases
base running. Yeah, stealingbases.com I think is his. I'll have to look and make sure that that's the correct web address. But he developed, and he was their base running coach. He was an assistant coach. He was their base running coach, and man, I tell you what, it's one of those aspects that.
Yeah, I tell you something. I think a really good tip. One of the things that I picked up from you that I really like to do, and I did it this weekend with the baseball team that I coach this fall, is keeping that notebook in your pocket.
Yeah.
And writing down the things that you see that that are good and that aren't so good. Mm-hmm. And that's a list. That's a running list of the things that you need to study, that you need to get better at, that you need, as a coach, you need to know so that you can pass that down to your players. I think that's a great start to that too.
Keep definitely keeping track of everything that happens, and then you know what areas we're particularly weak in, what areas we need to increase our expertise in.
Yeah.
I just looked it up. It is stealbases.com if you want to check that out.
Stealbases.com.
Matt Tallarico, and actually he's basically promoting his book on there about it, about his just instructional. It's just a base stealing instructional website, and it's about more than just stealing. It's about getting yourself in position to be a really great base runner. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Nice.
So you've got understanding roles and the power that there is in understanding roles, and the power that there is in really seeking to increase your expertise in multiple areas of whether you're a coach or a player, and we can include parents in that as well. But I think you and I would agree, and you even opened with this, and so there's no doubt that you agree that the most important power of all is the power of relationships. And that's something that I would say, if you're a young coach and you get that already,
yes,
you're way ahead of where a lot of us were. Because I think a lot of us, especially as a lot of us who began our coaching career with a different generation of kids as well, I don't know, the way we were raised maybe was just different. I mean, you know I love you, right? I mean, yeah, just because I'm hard on you, that's how you know, right? I mean, but it's not that you get rid of the other things. Mm-hmm. It's not that you say that you don't learn the game and you don't coach the game and you're not hard on your players and all that. But it's recognizing that you're not just coaching a game.
Sure,
you're coaching people.
Yeah. Well, and to get back to that, that definition of power of getting things done, it sounds like an underhanded tactic to convince someone to do things that they don't want to do or something like that. But I say this, I don't have a problem saying this. One of the best coaches that I know that is really good at getting their players to rise above and to be better than who they are is a guy named Tim Lewis, who I have coached with for a few years in basketball. He's a basketball coach, and I guess he probably wouldn't want me to say he's a track coach, but he's a track coach. So he can actually coach anything. Yeah. And I've told him he could coach anything because
he coaches people.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And I've seen it with my own eyes. Just a group of individuals come together, and as a team, after being with him for a short period of time, as a team, they would be willing to run through a wall for him. And that relationship translates into team success and coaching success. And that if you want to be a winning coach, and other things aren't working out for you, all the knowledge that you have about the game that you're coaching, and all the roles that you've had that you can use as part of your role power, it doesn't seem to be working. You should definitely look at the relationship side, because you can really get things done. I know another coach has told me before, it doesn't. Youth coaches, the most important quality of a youth coach is their ability to motivate the kids. How are you going to get them to want to do something? And if you can motivate kids, then you'll be a good youth coach. If you can't, you won't. And it doesn't matter how much talent you have. It doesn't matter. And nothing else matters. It just matters or what you know. It doesn't matter what you know. It just matters how much you're able to get them to do. I always thought that was a good piece of advice. Good.
That is good advice because it's true, and we could probably answer how do I do that then by proposing a thought, and that is, as with anything in our education system, in religion, I mean in Christianity, I would say this is true as well. In anything, and as with anything, I will say this, and I think this is 100% true. People tend to not follow teachings; they follow teachers.
Yes.
And you look through the life of Jesus.
Yeah.
He had a lot of great teachings, but they didn't get it. Most people who listened didn't get it.
Right.
There was something about him, about that teacher, that was very attractive, that made people want to do, wanted to be their best, wanted to be like him. And I see that in really great educators. I mean, what classes do you remember the most in school? Is it because of the class? Or is it because of the teacher?
Right.
Is it because of the professor? I mean, we have this little program here. We had it going on before the pandemic hit, and we sent all the students home a couple years ago. But it was called Rate My Professors. It was that's a weird online Rate Your Professor.
Is that like Glassdoor or something?
It's I don't know, but it wasn't Rate Them. It was like say something encouraging about them, compliment your professor, and students could take a little slip of paper and write down, what good things a professor has done or said, why such and such has had an impact on you. And I've read some of those because we've turned them into digital signage around in the building. We did that for a while. And a lot of the things that were spoken, about the professors, about why they really felt that this person had an impact on them, had nothing to do with the content that they were teaching.
Yeah,
had nothing to do with the it was the way they could tell that this person truly cares about you and your success. And I knew that this person loved their job, and it came out in the way they taught. They were very passionate about the way they taught. And it was all about those things. It had nothing to do with the content. And so I think if you look at us understanding that we need to know a lot about the game and become experts in part of the game, you could be a really great expert in the game, but not not have a love for your people that you're giving it to, that you're teaching it to, and they're not going to receive it.
Yep.
They're just not going to receive your teaching. So that without any doubt, and there are going to be times when there is nothing in the manual to tell you how to coach this way. I mean, I told a story that I've told on the podcast here before that actually I concluded my talk on Sunday with this. And I said, I had a player, who came and tried out for us. He played his freshman year. This was his freshman year would have been the first year, I think, that I was the head coach at Athens. And he came out his freshman year. He was a really good athlete, 3-sport athlete, and he played his freshman year on the JV team, which was no big deal. I mean, all of his peers did as well. His sophomore year, I think he felt like he felt like he was going to be on the varsity team in baseball because he was on the varsity team in football, and he's very athletic, and he very well could have competed on the varsity team as a sophomore. The problem was the senior class that year was really large, and there was a bunch of kids that were going to play over top of him. And so what do? You bring a sophomore up to sit the bench a lot and then get a chance to contribute now and then, or do you put him on the JV team and give him a chance to really get a lot of reps and really sort of dominate? Yeah, exactly. And so when it came time to make cuts, and we did have to make cuts that year, and because we had a lot of kids out, we sat with every kid and talked to him about their role. We explained what his role was going to be, and I explained to him what I just said. And I could tell that he was angry the whole time. And I thought to myself, he's not coming back. I mean, this was a guy who had, not only was he really athletic, but he had some attitude problems, to be quite honest, in those first, couple years of high school, middle school, things like that. And I just knew not coming back. And he didn't come back. In fact, not only did he not come back, That night, I started getting text messages from his dad, threatening messages, things like that, basically saying, you can take his uniforms, because I told him we're going to give you both uniforms, varsity and JV, and when the opportunity is there to bring you up to play varsity, on a day when I know you're going to play, we'll bring you up and you'll play. But otherwise, I want you to play every day on the JV team. Wasn't good enough. He was good. It wasn't good enough for him or for the family. And it was like, he should be on the varsity. You got kids up there that don't deserve to be there. And we're going to be at every game and we're going to watch you fail, basically is what they said. And they did. They came to the games and they cheered against their own classmates. He cheered against his own classmates. They would sit over there when somebody would make an error and openly cheer against his classmates.
Well, I guess that's a role.
Yeah. And so it was a trying time. I mean, that kind of faded out over the year. And then the next year I kind of figured he wouldn't come out anymore. I mean, basically the baseball days were probably done, which it was his choice. Right. And so he didn't come out his junior year. Had a good football season. I think he stopped playing basketball. So I think at that point he was just playing football. Came out his senior year, had a really good football season again, his senior year. And then as soon as football season was over and we were in the middle of our strength and conditioning for baseball, our off-season strength training program, I get this text, and it was from him. I hadn't had a text from him in a long time. In fact, it was funny, because when you get a text from someone that you haven't had a text from in a while, you look back and you see what the previous texts were, if you don't have it set to delete them. And I think mine were set to where I kept them forever, apparently. And so the last text I had from him was 2 years before. And which was basically a, F you, I'm not playing for you anymore, basically.
But a lot changes in 2 years.
A lot can change. Yeah, a kid can become very, very mature in 2 years. And this is where I'm going with this story. He basically said, Coach, I would really like to come back and play baseball, and I was hoping that maybe you and I could talk about that. And I said, okay, let's sit down. Our strength training began. Our strength training is going on now, but we'll be back in the weight room on Monday. So I said, why don't you come and chat? So I had the whole weekend to think. What am I going to do with this? Right? I mean, yeah. Because my first reaction was, I don't want this kid on our team.
Right.
I mean, people talk about cancers on teams.
Yeah.
He would without a doubt be one. Mm-hmm. And he came and sat down with me and he said, I don't feel like I deserve to be back on the team. But he said, I would really like to finish out my high school career playing baseball because I love baseball. And I said, well, I tell you what. I said, if you remember a couple of years ago, our last exchange wasn't very good. And he said, I remember. His head was down. And I said, you actively cheered against your classmates. And you could tell his shoulders slumped, everything. He said, I know. And I said, so I tell you what, if you put yourself in my shoes right now and you tell me what you would do if you were me. And he said, to be honest, I don't think I would let me come back. They said, I guess I'm hoping that you'll forgive me. And so I told him, I said, well, I will take all of this under consideration. I'm going to talk to our assistant coaches about it, and I'll let you know. I'll let you know before Monday, so that if we say yes, then come to strength training on Monday. And I said, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk because you got a lot of mending to do because some of those teammates, some of those kids that you cheered against are still on the team, And he said, I will definitely do that if you let me play. And so I talked to the coaches about it over the weekend, and they were like, you better not let him back. And one of them was like, well, maybe we should let the kids vote. And I'm like, no, we're not doing that. It's not the kids' decision. It's my decision. Yes, I agree. It's my decision. And if I decide to let him back on, then the kids need to trust the coaching staff that we know what we're doing here.
Yep.
And so we did. We let him come back. And I tell you, he was the first guy in the weight room every day for the rest of that off season. The last guy to leave. He had a broom in his hand before he left. He cleaned that. He made sure every weight was put back on the racks. He cleaned up. He did indeed talk to the team and tell them that he was really, really sorry for the way he behaved when he was a sophomore or freshman. No, a sophomore, and that he was going to make up for it this year. And he was one of really only 2 seniors that year, and he did. I mean, he was a vocal leader. And he's an athletic kid anyway, and so it was really great to have somebody make that kind of turn. You talk about repentance.
Yes,
that's repentance. And there were moments in the season where I thought, is the old kid going to come back? Because, he had a moment in one game where there was an overthrow. He was on first base, and there was an overthrow. The pitcher went to pick him off, and he overthrew the first baseman, and so he gets up and goes to second, and as he's on his way to second, he's looking to me, and I'm waving him on because the right fielder hadn't gotten to the ball yet. So he comes to third. Well, the right fielder picks up the ball, and this particular right fielder actually ended up going and pitching in a D1 school because he threw in the 90s. He threw an absolute strike to the third baseman. Well, when the third baseman catches the ball, and this was a rival school, so these kids all know each other, and they hate each other. I mean, some of these kids hate each other, and they particularly hated him because of the way, because the attitudes he had displayed years before. And these kids slammed the ball down on his helmet. I mean, slammed it down so hard that his face went into the dirt, and he was out. Right? It was a good play. I mean, on their part, he was out. And I thought he's going to get up and fight this kid. So I kind of stepped up in between, and I could hear their fans behind. I heard one guy yell, "That a way to slap the tag in on that a-hole," and I'm like, man, this is going to get out of hand quick. And he just gets up. When he gets up, he looks at me. He's got dirt on his face. He goes, "That must have been one hell of a throw." And I said, "It was." And he just sprinted off the field. Our kids in the dugout were already coming out of the dugout because they were sure that when he popped up, he was going to hit this kid. They knew a fight was coming, but he didn't. He just said that to me and ran off the field. And then from the rest of that game, he was the vocal leader of that game. Just, "Hey, let's go, guys. Let's go." I mean, and after that game, I thought, and we actually ended up losing that game by 1 run. And I remember on the way home, I told our assistant coach, I said, "We lost that game, but I saw a big win on that field tonight." He knew exactly what I was talking about. And it was that, and so and our team that year didn't have a great season in the regular season, but we got hot at tournament time. And that was 2016. We went all the way to the regional final. And so as we're standing out we lost that game, 1 game away from the state semifinal. And we're standing out there, and it was, he's done senior year. We're all giving hugs and everything and saying goodbye. And this kid comes up to me, and he looked at me in the eye, and he said, "I love you, Coach." And he said, "Thank you for giving me a second chance."
Yeah.
And from that point, I mean, I think I was just maybe starting to understand what coaching was about at that time. But after that year and after that experience, and not just that experience there in the outfield, that clinched it, but that whole year and what happened, that comeback story, that solidified it for me, what coaching is about.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah. It's about the people.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And here's the beauty of that it didn't end there, right? I mean, this guy went to OU, and I saw him on campus. He graduated, but I saw him on campus there the next few years, and we'd chat about the Cowboys. He's a Cowboys fan, and how's it going? How's it going, Coach? He still called me, "How's it going, Coach?"
Yeah.
Right? You'll be called Coach the rest of your life when you have that kind of experience with a kid. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
That's what it's about. That's what the coaching life is about.
The 3 powers.
So again, let us know you're listening. Thanks for listening. Thank you very much for listening. Took a little time for us to get this one on today, but we got her in the middle of work. This was a multitasking podcast today.
Yes, it was.
Both of us were working today. And let us know, if you want to leave a review, we'd love for you to leave a review about about the podcast. If you're not yet subscribed to us, be sure to subscribe, because you'll want to know when the next show comes in. It'll come right in automatically, and as soon as you get in your car in the morning, you can pop that baby on and hear Pat's voice.
Which is why everyone listens. So
We already know
we're
that.
not really sure we need to remove
Yeah, we already know that, right?
right for my smooth hick voice and my incorrect cliches of
All I know is that
calm as a cucumber.
you're calm as a cucumber. That'll be the quote of the century.
That's
right
about as funny as a screen door on a battleship.
there. A battleship.
Make like a tree and get out of here.
Okay. Yeah, all
It's
right.
been fun.
It has.
See everyone next week.